would consider myself also professionally as somebody who works in the field of museology and museum culture. But most of my life I was dealing with sports in the same time. So therefore I could recognize very well how much it means to suffer with sports, which is a side phenomenon in the high cultural field, because not everybody recognizes sports as cultural duty, and many people still leave it aside and do not understand that sports is it's a cultural expression of all cultures around the world. It's a very globalized phenomenon, but there's no market behind sports heritage, sports history than you have in modern arts, for example, or most of the other markets in culture. So therefore, it has not the same standing and not the same value and recognition, I would say. But I visited 2 years ago. I had been in Washington, D.C., and I had the chance to visit the fantastic museum of the African American people, and they have a huge exhibit about Black people performing sports. And this was very interesting because this gallery had been bigger than many other galleries where Black people are adjusted to. So I liked it a lot because, of course, through sports, which is an underdog phenomenon, right? So many people from minorities, many people from some sides of the society have chances to reach up and become famous. Wherever you look, football, soccer is the best example for that. I mean, where new players are recruited, they're usually recruited amongst the social lower population, and the same applies to sports a bit, I would say.
How did you become interested in sports history? Because it's not something that many people think about. They think about doing sports in so many different aspects of it, and then archaeology and history and art history and so on. But sports history, how did you become specifically interested in that?
I mean, the answer is like the answer of somehow all of us who end up with the sports heritage and sports history, right? So it's not the dream of a small boy, the professional dream of a small boy who says, we would like to become a sports historian. No, in my case, it was a real coincidence, because not like many other sports journalists or sports historians who come from professional sports, it was very different in my case. I studied archaeology, classics and archaeology, and I had the chance to do my PhD in ancient Greece in Olympia. So I found myself, I ended up in an archaeological site which was as one of the earliest one in the world related to sports, or how you would say in ancient terms, to agone, to competitions. And so I used to do my PhD there, and ended up to meet some people. Amongst them, I would say my main mentor, his name is Norbert Müller in Germany, and who really brought me to sports and sports history. So I was an archaeologist, very traditional archaeologist, participated in excavations, and did my PhD about a topic which was highly related to sports in antiquity. And thinking about sports in antiquity brings you very quickly to modern sports. And talking about sports for us, which is a normality, created problems already for me, because sports did not exist in antiquity. So there was the competition. I mean, today we have the first, the second, the third winner. Antiquity knew only one winner and the others are losers. So this philosophical approach is completely different. And this, of course, caught interest. And I started to study, to go deeper into it. And I ended up to study a lot about sports in the 19th century, and especially the differences between sports in antiquity and modern sports, coming from the philosophical sports term which was defined in England. So this caught my attention, and then I slipped into the world of sports. So taking over some assignments for museum concepts, sports museum concepts. This happened very early. I was assigned to do a concept for the Winter Sport Museum in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, where the Olympic Games used to take place in the 1936. And then one came to the other. And I ended up to become a museologist, working in sports museums and dealing with sports history. But until today, the big topic about, I would call it, the huge gap between competitive agones or competitive sports in antiquity and modern sports, as we know it since the 19th century, takes my attention, heavily takes my attention.
As a historian and a bit of a history geek, I'm a little, if we can touch on the study of sports history, like the historiography of sports history, if we can just touch on that a little bit. When did people start to study history of sports as, not necessarily as we know it today, which is, you know, very specific academic mode of research, but what is the earliest examples of, you know, people studying, especially in antiquity, or relating to classicism and antiquity?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because the interest if I talk about antiquity, I will continue to speak about the agones or the agon, so the competition in antiquity. And the interest studying this phenomenon is very old. It's as old as the interest to study antiquity in general. So it goes back to the Renaissance times, because at the Renaissance times, when all those ancient writings had been rediscovered and reread, also the famous writings of Pausanias, the description of Olympia, became popular again, and the people started to talk about sports in antiquity. But sports, as let's say, sports history as a modern academic discipline, is something which came from two sides. On the one side, you have the people dealing with ancient history, with classics, so academics working in classics, and they started to read ancient history about sports phenomena. This is one side. And this is a development which goes back to the late 19th century, I would say. But sports history, as part of a sports scientific education, came later. So sports history became a discipline at many huge universities who are educating in sports science, and it became a small part of sports science. So if you look at the people dealing with sports history today, both antiquity and also modern sports, you recognize that there are a lot of people from, I would call it, basic topics like history, like Latin, Greek, antiquity. So they're dealing with sports in antiquity. But many people who studied sports and have a sports background, they came into sports history as well. So the academic, I would say, scenery, and this is also reflected by the sports journalist scenery. The academic scenery is a very diverse one. So you have people who come from the sports context, and you have people who come from the traditional classics history context, dealing with sports. You might imagine that the outcome is very different. And of course, the people, many people coming from the pure historical disciplines, they love to look down to the sports journalism and also to the sports scientists. But I would say the viewpoint is a different one. And therefore, we have good conditions studying sports history today, because we're coming from different directions. But we have still the problem of recognition of sports as a pure and serious academic discipline in society. If I may connect another personal story to that, one of the one of the reasons why I ended up in sports history at the end and started to love this field as my academic passion, let's say, is that being an archaeologist and being in archaeology meant to be liaised with a very clearly defined group of academic interested people. So whatever you do in your field, you know the people who are interested in. And somebody said more as a funny fact, but he said, why should we publish our books? Because we know our clients, you know, we send an email around and we reach everybody. So I felt very much imprisoned in this very small community. And having the chance, I remember I was in Olympia, and I was asked by our supervisor at the archaeological excavation to take over a guided tour for a group of people from the Olympics, you know. And amongst them, there had been IOC members and very valuable and important people. So I took them around the archaeological site, and I had been invited to give a lecture to a bigger group. And I recognized that the things I was doing get recognized to a much broader audience, because wanting it or not, sports is something which matters to all of us. So I thought somehow it's a chance we can use also as academics to reach out to many other people. And during my career, I went very often to ancient Olympia, also to the International Olympic Academy, which is there, teaching. I had been professor there and was teaching my topic, which was ancient Olympic Games. But there had been groups with 50, 100 people coming from all around the world. So, and you reach out to those people, and they might reach out to their companions in their home countries. And this gave me recognition, which felt, to be honest, very well. And it does until today.